Hi, Gender and Communication. Welcome to week 10. This week we're talking about gendered education, and this chapter focuses on the kinds of messages you receive about gender in K through 12 education specifically. And so they're talking about messages from your peers and also messages from adults that might be there. So it's taking those messages and applying it to a specific context. And kind of so some people get to this chapter and like, oh, I got so many examples of how this happened to me or somebody else I know in K through 12. And then other people get to this chapter and they're like, nope, there was no messages about gender whatsoever. And so I guess if you find yourself into that second category, I think you probably need to reevaluate your perspective on that. It's highly unlikely that there were no messages about gender in your education. Even if you were homeschooled, that's coming from somewhere. Definitely at private schools, especially probably certain types of private schools are going to be more strongly rooted in traditional values and traditional with a air quote. So probably if you feel like there weren't any, you're just missing them. And so I would really ask you to like dig deep and see what you see and see if you can maybe go talk to somebody else, get their perspective, maybe do a little bit of reading and maybe it'll give you some ideas because probably there were some messages. And the other thing I want you to think about, and it's so perfect timing because I was just talking to somebody about something really similar the other day, like 2 days ago. If you talk to anybody who works with kids or especially knows a lot about kids, like a child psychologist, somebody who's into child development, they're going to tell you kids' behavior is always being shaped by these messages that they're receiving over and over and over. And one of the things we send kids messages about is their gender. So it might be subtle. I'm not saying it's always overt. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's very subtle, but we're always being shaped by that. And to add to that, it's not like you're like, so some types of shaping is like, oh, I was told this is what it means to be a little girl, and then I enacted that. And other type, that's one way it might play out, but then you might also be like, like that doesn't feel right to me, and the kid just continues to be the way they are. They still got shaped by the message. It just doesn't function the same way in everybody. So do you see what I'm saying? Like it applies to different people differently depending on what's true to them or even how susceptible they are to certain types of messages. But you're always being, especially when you're younger, but also as an adult, frankly, your behavior is always being shaped by these messages that other people are giving you. I mean, unless you have a personality disorder, and even then it's happening to a certain amount. So that's a challenge for this week, is to think about what some of those things are. And to give you a few examples, there's a lot of research that says that boys tend to be seen as troublemakers, and then they're treated as such even when girls do the same types of behaviors in class. So that might be a case where little boys face a certain type of discrimination that can impact them later. Like they might not get as good of an education, they might stop believing in themselves, they might think that the only thing they're good at is athletics, when that's not true. It's just nobody ever bothered to teach them to read. There are other examples where some types of testing have been found to be biased. I think gender bias in testing is starting to dissipate, but I just saw an example that was maybe 5 years old where the whole test was written in, it was a math test and it was all about football. So that was probably biased towards anyone who didn't know much about football, which is going to be that basically it's going to skew it towards the test was a little easier for the boys that were taking the test than the girls. And so there's lots of different things like that. I'm just giving you 2 examples, and your chapter has a whole bunch more about how this might happen. And then I want you to think about we got all these messages, and then how does that affect us while we're in school? I can tell you, I know somebody who got a lot of negative messages about what it meant to be a boy in school, basically that he was a troublemaker, and this is a family member of mine, and then he never did very well in school, and I really think a lot of it was because people told him he was a troublemaker. And I did a lot of the same things that he did in school, and I did not get in trouble. So maybe not all of them, but he kind of just, and if you talk to this family member of mine, he's like, I'm a bad student and I am a troublemaker. He really somewhere that got into his head. And he might've gotten that at home too, but it was coming from multiple places. And I think that that really unfortunately affected him, and it made him feel like he only had certain options in life, because those are the types of effects we want to think about. It's not just what happened, it's what effects did it have. And there's going to be effects on our culture and society. Like, you're going to read about how girls get tracked into some careers and boys get tracked into other careers. So that's what I want you to think about for this week. Also keep in mind that next week is going to be another like midterm and paper week. So I think there's I can't remember exactly which week was the preparation assignment, but you're going to get feedback about that. And then you're going to be finishing up those papers that we started like a couple weeks ago, and there's a peer review, but that's all next week. This week is just a regular content week, and then I'm just kind of trying to prepare you that next week we're wrapping up this unit. On these last 3 chapters. Well, 4 chapters, okay, because the 3 before then this week, all right? Yeah, that's where we are. I hope this chapter is interesting to you. You might be thinking about gender in a whole new context that you've never thought about it before. So have a good week.